Welcome in. The news is good as we continue to follow very closely the off-season, if you will, portal season for Florida State football. Who's coming, who's going, and Florida State obviously figures to be involved with a lot of players. One of them that I don't think they realized they'd get this good news about is coming back, in fact. Instead of leaving for the NFL or another team, Daryl Jackson has chosen to return to Florida State for another football season. We've all been intrigued by Daryl Jackson since his arrival from Miami a couple of seasons ago at 6'5", 330 pounds, Tom. This is a guy, a redshirt junior this past year, who everybody had high hopes for. It started slowly, but as the year went on, Daryl played better and better. I really thought, frankly, he, along with Farmer in the interior, were probably the two most consistent players on this defense for much of the second half of the season. So Daryl figures to be trending upwards, and you would need a big body like this in a 3-3-5. So I think it bodes nicely for Florida State to have him in the rotation.
Yeah, this signals that Florida State was going to be pretty aggressive in terms of the retention front. Again, this is, the collective game. This isn't a time yet with the house settlement where it's in-house with Florida State with some of these NIL agreements. So this means the Battle's End did some legwork here to have Daryl return. I agree with you. I think Joshua Farmer was Florida State's most consistent player across the entirety of the season. But I think their best defensive lineman for the second half of the year, you could argue it is between Farmer and Jackson.
Yeah.
Jackson, the Miami game seemed to be the moment for me where it clicked a little bit extra for him. He took it to an extra gear. With some of the guys from Nebraska that Florida State was in on, you thought maybe you'd get 3 defensive linemen from Nebraska coming in. Looks like maybe it might be 1 out of the portal. This helps. This helps everybody calm down, I think, a little bit in that regard. So it's a good get for Florida State to bring him back for another year.
Well, and I think the biggest thing I saw with Daryl, he played lower later in the year. He was able to play behind his pads much better than he had previously, and that was the frustrating aspect because he has that girth, he has that strength, he has that quickness, didn't always have the technique. The technique got better as the season went on. The productivity went with it. Meaning that as he played smarter and better and with better technique, the more the production showed up in terms of tackles for loss, and pressures. And I think Daryl's a guy that might just be scratching the surface. The other aspect of this is that we watched Daryl Jackson mature a little bit. Daryl was a guy who early on, I'm not real sure that on a daily basis you got the best out of him in the way that you'd like. He had reps in which he dominated. He had reps in which you didn't know he was there. I think that we began to see a much more consistent effort from Daryl. Now, obviously, we know that the NCAA ruled against him originally. He was not able to play football in his first year here. He was a guy that had to sit out the entirety of that season. It was thought at that time you may never get him because Daryl, whether these rumors were true or not, really didn't love school, was a guy that wanted to play football, had the body to play football, and was looking to play a lot of football. But he stuck it out and stayed eligible. And when he got a chance to play, played, and then played this past year. And I think coming back is a smart move for him because I imagine that draft grade, if he plays to his abilities and plays more consistently, will climb quite steadily.
Yeah, I think that's the elephant in the room here is he had declared his intent to go to the NFL just about a week, 10 days ago. I'm sure that draft grade that came back said you got more work to do. And it's fair. It's fair to say that. The potential has been there. The potential was realized a little bit in the back half of the season against some decent offensive lines where there were good comps for pro prospects. And you say, all right, Daryl, that's good. But I'm sure what he heard was you're a day 3 pick. This is a guess, but I mean, come on, you wouldn't come back if you were a day 2 pick. So you're hearing day 3 pick. There's a chance that you could make a team out of camp, but we need to see more. If you want to make some of that guaranteed money, we got to see a little bit more out of you in the college ranks. And I'm sure at that point, that's when you do a cost-benefit analysis from an NIL standpoint with what is a collective offering you in college versus how much could you make at the pros at the next level. And if you do a little bit of work there, you say, what do I stand to gain? If I come back for Florida State and I'm anchored with Terrence Knight, my new position coach, and Tony White's defense for 2025, and we play Alabama out the gate, and I show out in that game, and I show out against the in-state rivals and against Clemson one more time, I put 12 good games on tape, I stand to make more money. That's what I would assume is going on here, is this is a simple economic cost-benefit analysis. Didn't like what the NFL had to say, but he knows that he's coming into form. He's rounding into form, and somebody who deserves credit for that is somebody who won't be coaching him next year directly, and Odell Haggins. Odell has been relentless on getting the most out of Daryl Jackson, and it started to happen for him in a lost season for the team. It was not a lost year for Daryl Jackson.
I was just about to go there. I'm glad you did. Odell Haggins plays a big part in this, and this is also a pat on the back for the new defensive line coach, and Terrence Knight, who I think a lot of players are going to have immense respect for his recent time in the National Football League. He's a giant man, just like Daryl Jackson is. A relatable factor there probably about what it means to be in the trenches recently and to have played at the highest level. But I think Odell has been a father figure, and I don't want to say that that's the relationship they have. I'm just talking about the role. There were problems early on with the combination of Jackson and Farmer, perhaps leveraging for more money or threatening to leave and doing things of that ilk. We'd hear these whispers consistently. What was true, what wasn't true, not real sure. We know that those rumors were out there quite a bit, and it was on Odell to try to kind of diffuse that situation and get those kids to see the bigger picture and understand their roles here as leaders. And I think obviously Odell deserves a lot of credit here because I think we've seen it with Daryl. And Daryl choosing to come back, you're right, probably a direct response to the fact that he was not going to make the money he thought he was going to make because he was not going to be drafted where he thought he was going to be drafted. But the opportunity and then the willingness to come back here is a good thing. I think you'll get the best version of Daryl Jackson. We have to hope. I'm done making grand proclamations about what a player or a team or a unit's going to be for Florida State after this disaster last year. But I am excited with the return of that body type and the effort we saw in the back half of the season.
Yeah, I don't say that the cost-benefit analysis thing with a tinge of cynicism the way I would if some other players are announced to come back for Florida State. I think Daryl's effort has been earnest consistently. I don't think he took things lightly in the beginning of the season. He worked very hard in camp, which is where I saw a lot more of the practices than I did in season. And he struck me as somebody who was really putting it out there and trying to make the most out of this year. He didn't see the fruits of that labor until the back half of the season. If there are some other veteran players and we're on a video to react to it, I'll tell you that I got to see it. I got to see it to believe it. I think the work ethic has been there. And then also in terms of just from an interview standpoint, Daryl is always an easy guy to talk to, likable player, likable person, it would seem, within the scope of the roster. And you need that. As many of those guys as you can have this upcoming season, you need. It's just going to be really fascinating to see where they line them up and how they use them in a three-man front. If that's at least a significant part of what Tony White wants to employ, doesn't mean that he could be multiple. But if it is a three-man front, Daryl's athletic enough that he doesn't have to be over the ball.
Yeah, so you're right.
This is a fascinating move for Florida State. It's a plus. It's just the implementation of it. I'll be interested to see how they use Daryl in spring and fall camp.
Camp was always going to be interesting. Now, when you get a figure like this back in camp and part of the rotation at the very least, then it's exciting to see how they can build on the depth. And that includes going back into the portal in the coming days. And so we'll have you updated as that happens. How many more down linemen do they bring in, offensive and defensive? We're all watching very carefully. The trenches were a place where Florida State suffered greatly. Right here, warchant.com. We'll update you constantly. We'll be on the ready for videos just like this one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, pass it around. He's Tom Lang. I'm Jeff Cameron. Thanks for watching on Warchant TV and warchant.com.